welcome to this masterclass session on the media. I'm so happy that you've come to be a part so we can have a dialogue and really I can share with you some key points and factors and then really hear your questions and your concerns or your comments regarding media in the Bahamas, particularly today, and with a serious concentration, in particular on broadcast, which is my specialty as a broadcast journalist. I think understanding my story is a good place to start because I believe in being able to understand my story may give you a little bit of a little more context, perhaps, onto what it is we want to talk about today. I knew, let's say, I graduated from high school back in '93 from Kingsway Academy, and I think it was in grade 7 when I went to grade 7. I knew at that point what I wanted to do, and there was two things. I said I wanted to either be a banker or a journalist, not knowing the life would have it that I'll end up doing both. And so fast forward, knowing those two things, the first thing I did when I came out of school, obviously after University of Bahamas and so forth, was being able to work in the bank as a banker. That turned into 6 years for me as a broadcast, as a banker. And after 6 years of working with CIBC at the management level, starting out as a teller, moving up to management and working with the region, the bank in the region and so forth. I would never forget, I was working at the Paradise Island branch as a customer service manager there. And we had our televisions on in the bank, as we normally would, have it tuned into news. And that was on September 4th. And I would never forget, that was the day of the straw market fire. And I saw Darryl Miller and everybody responding to the straw market fire. And there was something inside of me that ignited in me and said, you know what, perhaps, yeah, you love banking, but your greater passion, which you went to school to study and everything, is journalism. Why aren't you doing it? I felt that passion. Days later, several days later, on the 11th of September, the famous 9/11 that we know today, infamous 9/11, took place. And I would never forget, the world came to pause. No doubt we here in the Bahamas did likewise. And it was at that point I said to myself, because I was home that day, I said to myself, you got to go do this thing. You have to go into your career. And so I just cold turkey quit the bank. And I found myself home trying to figure out, okay, well, you've done this. Now, what's next? I thought it would have been easy to find a job in media. By that time, you know, the big dogs, or it was ZNS. And I applied to them, nothing. I had been applying to ZNS. And nothing ever happened. And then eventually, after wanting to give up almost 3 months of sitting home, I applied to More FM. And they had a consultant couple there who from the US who was trying to help rebrand the station. And they said, okay, we'll give you a chance. We're trying to start news up again. It'll just be you. And so I went in and kind of created a news department for them. And I did that for maybe about 2 years at More FM, about a year, maybe, or More FM. And then having connected with Jerome Sawyer, who at the time was at Island FM, he saw me at a conference and he said, I love the way how you report. And he said, you know, you're focused. We were at a conference in Grand Bahama. And he said, listen, you're handling this on your own. He said, you're very disciplined. He said, when you come back, maybe I can talk to my boss, Charles Carter, about hiring you. Sure. Okay. Did that. That turned into success for me. And I spent 2 years at Island FM. It was during those 2 years at Island FM that we formed a partnership with Cable Bahamas to start television news for Cable Bahamas. It was called Newsbreak. And so our radio news team at Island FM began doing TV news for Cable Bahamas. And that's how Cable Bahamas began with its television broadcast Newsbreak. I was a part, interestingly, of that first news team. And I did that for about 2 years. And then I'll never forget, I ran into a conversation with Obi Wilscombe. He said, I've been watching, young man, what you've been doing with Cable Bahamas. He said, you're a threat to ZNS. We got to get you over to ZNS. He said, have you ever thought about coming to ZNS? I said, many times. And so they set up the interview with the executives, did the interview. ZNS were like, how come you never applied this before? I said, just check your files. I applied about 9 times, and I kept getting a letter. We have nothing available, nothing available, nothing available. Right. So nonetheless, that turned into opportunity at ZNS. And that's why I spent 13 years at ZNS. And then the door opened for me to come to Eyewitness News. The CEO here wanted to start something new and fresh that had not happened in the Bahamas. And he said, listen, I believe you're the right man for the job. We talked. He liked the vision I had for creating a 21st century newsroom. And I spent many weeks writing out a 31-page document that would create what is known today as Eyewitness News. And here I am we celebrated last week our 2nd anniversary in Eyewitness News. And so that's been my career. Yeah, very, very interesting journey. But one that I knew from day one was the journey for me, because I knew what it was that my gift and talent would take me down that line. So that's how I got into media. And so I want to talk about, first of all, about really the overview of media, right? What media seek to do, whether it's print, whether it's public relations, whether it's broadcast, whether it's online. The focus of media is obviously to inform, give you information. It's also to give you enough facts to make a decision on something, right? So it educates you, it gives you information that you need. And then we also know that in the media, it also provides entertainment. And so that's kind of the broad scope of what media is seeking to do. Now, having said that, let's zero in a little closer to what it is that we do in the news media business, as you would hear our term referred to, and in particular, the electronic media business. Electronic media being radio, television, online, all right? Because those are the main focus of what the electronic media seeks to do. And with that same mandate that I mentioned to you in hand before, of informing, educating, and not so much entertaining, that's not the aspect of news, even though if you talk to people internationally anywhere, the networks will tell you that television news provides a level of entertainment. Whether that seems to be breaking a cardinal sin as to what news does, the reality it does. That's why it's television. And that's why you see networks spend so much money and time designing a good package that you can enjoy while you're getting information as well. Because let's just face it, as humans, we crave entertainment in almost anything we do. We want to enjoy doing what it is that we're doing. We don't want to do something that we don't have to do or that's not fun or enjoyable to us. It's like going to the doctor. No one really wants to go to the doctor, but you go because you have to go or you need to go. So with the electronic media, the whole design is to be able to pull you in so that you would get the information that we're disseminating. You would get the news stories that we're trying to give you. And we try to do it in an attractive way to bring you a little closer to the platforms that we do what it is that we do on those platforms. So I think understanding that helps people to have a better understanding of our roles as the fourth estate, right? Because oftentimes people approach the media looking for information or looking to use a platform that we provide to get their information out, not understanding the purpose of what we do. And that's why a lot of times the information gets distorted, or the understanding of what we are here for gets distorted, because people don't understand the role of the media, news media. If you're a company and you're seeking to get airtime on a news station, or you're a public relations firm, you're seeking to get the maximum exposure for your clients, there has to be one important thing that you need to meet in order for that entity in news to give you considerable attention. And that is, there must be a storyline, right? It's as simple as that. When we say a storyline, what we're really referring to is there has to be a reason why we are telling people about your story. There has to be a reason why we are going to promote what it is you're saying, what information it is that you're doing, what your press release contains. There has to be a reason behind us wanting to put that on our platform. And so I always tell businesses and organizations or public relations officers who work for people, if you want to attract us to get your story some airtime and to run your story, then make it something that's palatable for our viewers and our listeners. And that is, we want something that people will say, oh, this is an interesting story. Ah, this helped me. Oh, this had some great information. Oh, wow, this, I didn't know about this. And so there has to be a news link, a news element. And that's why so many companies pay thousands of dollars for the PR experts, because the job of the PR expert is to be able to find, in whatever it is that company wants to disseminate to the mass media, find the element that will rope or link people in to want to make that story something that's of interest to people, right? So our job as the news media is to be able to take that information and to be able to deliver that to the public, but deliver it in a way that will continue to hold up the flag or the mandate of what it is that we stand for, right? I started to talk about the role of the fourth estate, because I believe that it's very pertinent and very important to understanding our position. Too often, people have the mentality that the fourth estate is just simply there to be your propaganda machine, or simply there to be your platform for disseminating whatever you think your information should be. And perhaps maybe in our country, the Bahamas, that's how news started out becoming, just a platform where all we do is just push out information, just push out information, just push out information, and not really provide accurate analysis to the information. And providing analysis is what has brought a news media agencies into modern news and into the 21st century, because we move away from just simply providing a platform for information to be disseminated to actually breaking down the information, for actually fact-checking whether it has an element of truth to it, fact-checking to see whether there's an agenda behind it. That's what we call news analysis. It's something that our station has ventured into doing every night with my news analysis show, providing analysis and a broader scope of the story to just a basic 2-minute story you may hear or see on the nightly news. And that's what you find a lot of the US networks do. The 24-hour news networks, they provide a lot of analysis to the information. Because let's face it, so much information is coming at you. The only way that you're going to be able to understand, what do I do with all of this, is if you're able to have somebody to make sense of it all, and to bring analysis and context, or perhaps to bring a different perspective that you didn't even consider when seeing or hearing the information. So that's how the news media has evolved over the years. It didn't start out like that. It started out with traditional anchors like Walter Cronkite, and all the others who just simply provided the news. They just give you the news. They read the news. They read the stories, and they leave it up to you for interpretation. That's what we call basic news. And then you have other aspects of news, right? Where you have the analysis, where you have the other perspectives, where you have what we call the balanced story, whereas we bring you a story, but we bring you all sides of that story and allow you, the viewer or the listener, to make a decision on what you believe is truth. Doesn't necessarily mean it is truth. We leave it up to your interpretation for what you believe is true. That's basic news gathering, and that's what they will teach you in college. That's what they'll teach you in university, to ensure that your story is always balanced, that you prevent sides to the story, both sides to the story. And I believe that when you understand that, you will have a better perspective on why so many news agencies have different views and perspectives and different ideas as to how they will present their news. If you look at what you see happening in the United States of America, the networks all have a certain perspective on what they present. Fox News has a different perspective that CNN will present. CNN has a different perspective than what MSNBC or NBC and CBS and ABC will present. BBC will be different from CBC in Canada. So they all have a different perspective based on what their foundation is that they want to project or want to pursue. When we talk about news analysis, we talk about really bringing a different discussion to the story of the day, right? Bringing a different perspective to the actual story of the day, and bringing people in with different views and beliefs on that particular story of the day. And what it does, it gives you more, and when we talk about analysis, it gives you more discussion on the story and perhaps opens you up to different viewpoints to a story, and then perhaps spends more time dissecting a story than the actual mainstream media, which simply is guided by time limits. They just present the story and they move on to the next. Okay, so there's different kinds of things, different kinds of roles of the media, but all developing what we call the fourth estate, and how the fourth estate, particularly in the Bahamas, has developed over the years from just basic presenting the news to you. You see many stations now have news shows, talk shows, which takes the stories and hold more discussion. All of that is a part of the role of the fourth estate, which is so important in a democracy, because what it does is it brings a certain level of accountability. Before the fourth estate understood its role and its position in a democratic society, it kind of limited democracy, right? And that's why I always tell people, even if you hear people talking about a certain subject or presenting a certain view, you may not agree with it, you may not like it, but all of that is a part of being in a democratic society. Because in a democratic society, one of the things you do have is a free press. And a free press is you have the ability to say what you feel about something, how you feel about something, to investigate something, to push the bar on something, to question people on things, when before certain subject matters would appear to be, oh, it's off limits. We're not going to touch it. We leave it alone. And so that's why so many people are appreciating the evolution of the fourth estate, particularly in the Bahamas, because we're now, as a media, taking a more meaningful role in shaping democracy and in shaping our country, in providing analysis, in providing other sides to a story, in providing other voices to a story, rather than the traditional people that you will hear bring a story. We're providing a lot more to it. And it's what so many people have grown and appreciated the fourth estate for, because it, of course, provides a louder voice for the people in the country. I talked, before talking about the fourth estate, I went into talking about the news media and how it should work for you. And what I meant by that is how, if you are in a few categories. One, if you are in public relations, or you were in a company that's seeking to know how best to utilize the media, understanding what the role is, so that you know that when you go to approach a media organization for coverage, you understand what their mandate is, so you can make sure that what it is that you're trying to push out kind of dovetails into their mandate, so that you get adequate coverage and you get press coverage. And I'll just push to the back of to the back of the room, or your story gets buried in a stack of other stories, so that you get coverage, because you understand, okay, if this particular news organization focuses on stories that impact people, then I want to make sure that my press release that's talking about maybe a giveaway focuses on the needs of the people. So when I go to them, I'm talking about the needs of the people. Eyewitness News, we're doing a giveaway about grocery bags, 100 grocery bags to the people. We recognize that so many people are starving, so many people are without, and this provides an opportunity to help people. So if you know that the station's platform is being the voice of the people, that's going to be something they want to connect with, because they want to hear about how this is going to impact people. They want to come out there, and guess who they want to talk to? Not just you, they want to talk to who? The people. That's their focus, the people, you see? So what you do is you set up press opportunities where you have the people there, because you recognize they're going to want to talk to the people as well. That's how you win on roping in the news media, because while you're trying to promote what it is you're doing, you're also, at the end of the day, meeting the mandate of that organization, who wants to get a certain angle of a story out as well. And that's called genius public relations, knowing how to meet the mandate of the news media to make something work for them as well. Oftentimes, people will say, when they watch newscasts, when they watch or listen to the radio, or when they read something, they'll say, oh, the news is so depressing. All they do is focus on the bad, the bad, the bad. You hear schools oftentimes would say it, they always come when something bad happened, but they never talk about the good. You never hear them talking about our prize giving or stuff like that. I oftentimes tell these people that you have the concept so wrong. You have to understand the purpose of the media. The purpose of the news media is to provide news. And when you say news, that's a broad definition of a term. But the reality is, the headline news is what is happening in my country that I didn't know about that could impact the way I live. That's news. And oftentimes, the unfortunate thing is, a lot of times, what makes news is a negative because it is impacting somebody right then and right now. But that's the role of the news media. You want that. If a news entity is not broadcasting the day-to-day news, then you're going to find somebody who's giving you the day-to-day news, because you want to know what happened last night in my country while I was asleep. Did something happen? What happened today while I was doing my work or doing my job? Did something happen? Did something happen to our children? Did something happen to our society? Did something happen in our government? These are the kind of things that people will want to find out, and what makes the quote unquote news. Now, does that mean there's no room for those feature stories? Does that mean there's no room for those stories on people who are doing an excellent job in education, or who are making a difference every day? Yes, there is. There is room for that. And that's why a well-balanced newsroom knows how to keep a pulse on every aspect of what's happening in our society, so we don't appear to be just one-track minded. We don't appear to just be only focusing on the negative, but we're also finding out about those great stories, those success stories, the things that are working, the things that are impacting our people well. A good newsroom has a pulse on it all. And that's why we depend so much on the people calling us and saying, did you know about this? Did you know about this? Did you hear about this? Because that's how we get that story to you. It is important to always be on the pulse of newsrooms, to know what it is, that if you want a coverage of a story, then it has to be something that's going to be appealing to our viewership. Because if it's not appealing to the viewership, people won't watch. And the reality is, at the end of the day, these are businesses who are doing what they're doing to also be able to be viable and to stay alive and to be able to function. So it's important to know what is news, so that when you are trying to solicit or appeal to a news organization for coverage, you understand that it has to be something that impacts people, or something that people want to be drawn into. We also, in the 21st century, now have to deal with what we've heard a term that was perhaps coined best by the US President, Donald Trump, fake news. And it's real. It does exist. Yes, it does. Fake news is out there. Yes, it is. And we in mainstream media now cannot turn a deaf eye, a blind eye or a deaf ear to it. We've got to be aware to understand that it is very much a part of the news cycle every day. Now, that being a good thing or a bad thing, that's entirely up to you. But the reality is, a station that chooses to ignore that it actually exists is actually preparing its burial. Because at the end of the day, you have to understand that as a mainstream media, you're either going to have to debunk something that's been out there and say, no, that's not true, here is the truth. You're going to have to be able to be relevant to what is out there and not play a deaf ear to it and say, okay, I'm aware this is circulating, but here are the facts. And so we find that fake news and those media outlets that are out there, or those rooms that are out there, and those agencies that are out there creating their own news, thinking that they are a credible news agency, when they're not, we've got to recognize that the reality is they do exist. And the reality is they have the respect of so many people, and you cannot take that away from them. Your job, though, is as mainstream media, is to fact check information that you've got, not just be impulsive, because once you put it out there, you can't take it back. And if you take it back, you're going to have to apologize for it, and then there's so many other repercussions for that. So accuracy is important. Yes, in the news media business, you're always pushing to try and be first, but we prefer to be accurate than to be first, because at the end of the day, putting something out there wrong can do more damage than being the last person to get it out there. And so it's important to understand that fake news does exist. And our role is, and our job is, to keep a pulse on what's out there, so that we can say whether it's accurate or not, so people won't form an opinion around something that does not actually exist. That's important. You have a lot of people out there that believe they can be journalists, right? You have citizen journalists out there. You have people who are your eyes and ears out there. There's a place for them. Yes, there is. Because, as I said, in a democratic society where the media is evolving every day, and you're the fourth estate to keep your nation in a place of democracy and accountability, those people are critical to you because sometimes they're able to get their hands and teeth on things that you can't. They're able to put things out there that you're not aware of, that you're able to build a story on, build tips on. Yes, there have been many times that mainstream media followed up on tips that have been placed out there by your non-traditional media outlets, and we've been able to grab stories, fact check and build on stories that you hear based on the fact of what's circulating out there. You cannot ignore social media. Social media is a vital tool to the 21st century newsroom. And any news entity that tries to not embrace social media will not survive going forward. It is an important tool. Yes, we know that the detriments of social media, we know the damage social media can do, but it also can reach people that you would not ordinarily be able to reach through your traditional newscast and your news set times. Social media will get that information out there to so many other people. It also has the ability to go to where your demographics normally would not reach. And so it is a vital tool. So today's media person would want to embrace fully social media and use it to its advantage to not only get information out there, but also to receive information. A lot of the information that we get at Eyewitness News, people always want to know, how is Eyewitness News on this story so quick? How are they able to get this story? Well, it's because of people in the social media. So social media world is a booming world, and it's a multi-billion-dollar one too. And people will be your eyes and ears out there because they can trust you. And you have to trust them to know that when they bring you information, while you don't just go and broadcast it, you fact check it, but you have to trust the fact that they will be your eyes and ears out there, particularly in a country like the Bahamas, where we're in an archipelago of islands. And we don't necessarily have correspondence in every island. You've got to depend on people, your viewers, your citizens, to be your reporters out there to get you the information, to shoot the video, because you can't get your video cameras there. They shoot your video, they shoot your stories, they pass it on to you, and we're able to get it out to mainstream media because of social media. So it's a very crucial and important tool that we have had to learn to incorporate into journalism, into the mainstream journalism. And as I say mainstream journalism, I think it's important to say that traditional journalism still exists today and still should be respected, but has so much evolved from the textbook version of what journalists do. The textbook version that they taught us when we were learning how to be good journalists, it has since evolved so much because of the prevalence of social media, because of the introduction of fake news. You've had to kind of change traditional journalism to become relevant to people today, particularly since people no longer sit down like they used to in the 70s and 80s and even the early 90s. How they sit down as a family every evening and watch the evening news and then talk about it. That's gone now. People get their news at their fingertips. People get their news and they watch the news when they have a moment. They pick up their phone and they go on their phone and find out what's the latest story of the day. That's how people get news. People may watch a newscast for about a half an hour, but they will watch it also at their convenience. So you can't just have a news running at 7 o'clock and says, if you miss it, you miss us. No, you've got to make that news available to people so that because of how people work nowadays, because of what people are doing nowadays, everyone is not sitting down at the same time for news. You've got to be relevant in making sure that your platforms are accessible to people all the time, that they can get their news and information. And all of that has been incorporated into what we call today 21st century journalism, and really understanding the importance of social media in news and in journalism today. That is very, very, very important. I know I've been talking for a long time, so I want to take some questions so that we kind of shape the conversation toward what it is you want to know. There's one other area I want to cover, and that is dealing with the media in crisis periods and crisis times, like this pandemic that the world is dealing with, and understanding how to decipher what is accurate news from what is too much news, from what is actually somebody's take on something versus actual facts, and knowing when to just to back away from it during these difficult times and take a break from it. All of those are important. But if you do have a question, I'll take some questions here, and then we'll go on into that aspect.
Okay, I have one here from social media on Facebook. It says from Benderly Martin, if fake news is let into the public ear by a news entity and the truth is found out at a later time, how do you go about rectifying a mistake like that? If the news is now considered old, would it make sense to dig it up and let the truth be told?
Good question. And I think the answer to that should always be yes. As a credible mainstream organization, you should always want to be held accountable and held to the highest standard of truth and accuracy. That's what governs mainstream media. That makes us, that's what differentiates us from them. And from them meaning the sites and the spots and the groups that just talk about a lot of propaganda, or that may have half-truths, or that's just there for the other information, for the gossip. That's what makes us mainstream. Mainstream is that we always strive for accurate information. And people are to always know that when we say something, they can back it up as true. And if we've inadvertently erred, we should be bold enough and strong enough and credible enough to come back and say, if we made an error, we apologize. Here is the correct information. No matter how outdated, no matter how stale it is, you have that onus is. The onus is on you as a mainstream media outlet to always ensure integrity in what you broadcast. And it's important to come back and correct your mistake. Listen, it happens. People make mistakes. You make mistakes. We make mistakes. The important thing is knowing how to correct the mistake and not leave it out there. You can't just say, oh, that story done gone. I ain't gonna bring it back. No, because that's somebody's reputation that's been impacted. That's somebody's business that perhaps has been impacted. And it's important to always correct it because it maintains the integrity and standard of your news organization, that you will always be truthful in disseminating the news.
All right, any other questions for Clint? You can just unmute your mics, or you could just post them in the chat. I see one.
Sure, go ahead.
Why is it that not much news stories are presented with background fact checks?
Why is it that not much stories are presented? I think I would disagree with that in mainstream media. I think the majority of what we do is done is fact checked as essential. When you see a mainstream media outlet makes an error, that's not the norm. That's few and far between. I think what a lot of times people are assuming is a lot of the incorrect information are coming from organizations or sites that they deem to be mainstream media, but they're not necessarily mainstream media. They're not the actual mainstream media that's held to the standard by IRCA, the Utilities Regulations Competitions Authority. That's who we're governed by as a mainstream media outlet. That's who the mainstream media, and when we talk mainstream media, we're talking about Eyewitness News, Cable Bahamas, Our News, the Broadcasting Corporation, ZNS News. Those are JCN, Jones Network. Those are the main television news stations, right? And then you have a number of online news entities as well as the dailies, Tribune, The Guardian, the Bahama Journal. Those are mainstream media, all right? Not a lot of these groups that are online that people go to are mainstream media. They don't have to fact check. We have to fact check because we can be cited and fined if we don't fact check. And most of the time, that's why we take our time in getting stories to the air, because we want to make sure that they're actually accurate and true. That's the news entity of it, right? Now, when you go into news analysis, always understand that analysis is a combination of two things. Analysis is a combination of the story as well as contributors who bring their expert opinion to a story as well. So you have to balance those out. That's why in mainstream news, you don't have analysis. You have to just represent the story to you, and that's it. In news analysis shows, you discuss a story and you bring experts in for their opinions or their viewpoints or even the subject matter themselves on what actually transpired, to bring a dialogue, to create a discussion on that particular area. That's different.
All right, we have quite a few. So you want to continue, or we can?
Sure, no, you can go ahead with your questions.
Okay. I see. Let me go here with one on Facebook. It says, "How do journalists navigate through investigative journalism without fear of losing their jobs or their life?"
It is very difficult, particularly when you are in a small nation like the Bahamas, where we like always often say everybody knows everybody. It is very difficult. You will find that in the Caribbean, I've sat in many workshops in the Caribbean with my colleagues in the region, and they will all tell you that it is so hard to do investigative journalism in the Caribbean region because our economies are so controlled by governments or prominent business people that it always trickles down to impacting you or your family. And that's a very dangerous thing. And that's why you find that investigative journalism happens a lot in the US or around the world, but very, very little in the region, in the Caribbean, because of how interconnected governments and prominent business people are to their people. It is so hard to do investigative journalism, particularly if you don't have Freedom of Information Acts where you can have access to information. Everything you need to get to verify something has to be based on somebody leaking the information to you or finding out the information and telling you. And oftentimes they're concerned for their job. They're afraid of victimization. They're afraid of being in trouble. So it is so difficult to do it, or it takes such a long time to do it. People don't understand how long it takes to investigate a story because you have to go through so many layers and you have to protect the people who are giving you information and verify at the same time without there being repercussions to it. And it's going to be very fearful. And that's why a lot of people don't touch it.
Another one is, this person says, "Clint, how do you separate the news from your personal time? I assume you're working even when you're not working, as the news never stops."
You just got, good question. I always tell people, when you take a career on as a broadcast journalist, you're a broadcast journalist all the time. It's like a doctor. Well, a doctor may have a shift or may have a time when they meet their patients, but wherever they go, they're a doctor. If something happens, they've got to go into their work mode and help and assist. You're always a journalist. So while we may be off from a traditional work shift or schedule, we're still journalists. So our ears and eyes are always open to what's happening and what's going on, because most of the stories that we get, we find out when we're not actually at work. And so it's hard to separate it because it becomes your life. It does become your whole being, but you have to know when to be able to turn it off, move away from it, so you can have your personal time. And that's very important, to have your personal time, because it provides balance to you. But it is very difficult. I do agree. It is very difficult.
All right, Catherine, you can go ahead and ask your questions. Unmute your mic.
Hi, Clint. Great
Hi.
presentation.
Thank you.
I had a few questions, and I'm not seeing them show up in the chat anymore, but one of the greatest ones was, what was the greatest accomplishment in your career, and what has been the greatest challenge?
All right. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for being a part. Greatest accomplishment for me, I still remember it clear as day, was covering the inauguration of Barack Obama when he became the first Black U.S. president. And I was working at the Broadcasting Corporation then, and I was selected to go and cover it for the Bahamas. I just remember seeing the people and feeling what we felt. And we're not even Americans, but because of what it represented for people of color, it was such an amazing experience for me. And I won't ever forget it. Also, covering Chogam when it was in Malta, and the Queen was there and so forth. Those have provided great, memorable moments for me in my history. As far as the most challenging, wow. There's been so many challenges, right? But I think for me, the most challenging is always when we're investigating stories, trying to get that story out. And there's a particular story I'm still working on that I've been working on for a long time, and trying to just make sure all the checks and balances are in play before you can broadcast that story. That's always challenging. It's always difficult. I think for me, even what I did here at Eyewitness News about a year ago today, actually, when we were covering that mega shootout at a home where 3 men were killed, of the police shootout. I remember going back to the house and taking people through what it looked like in that house. And you doing that, recognizing that at the end of the day, you're ruffling a lot of feathers, but you're trying to tell a story because you want your Bahamian people to have all sides of a story, not just one side of it. And that can often be difficult in our environment where the police and government play such prominent roles in our society. It can be very difficult because people won't always rise to the place of maturity, and it can be very difficult broadcasting crime and politics in our country. Very difficult because people oftentimes take it personal.
All right. There's one that says, you spoke earlier about different American stations having different perspectives. What are the different perspectives of news stations here in the Bahamas?
Good question. Good question. Interesting. Good question. I guess they were referring to is, for example, in the U.S., you know, Fox is leans towards Republican, so they bring the Republican analysis of things. You know, Fox News, the president is the best thing in the world, and then you know CNN kind of have the Democratic preference, and so all of it, what they do, it promotes a Democratic side of things. So yeah, I understand that kind of way. Here, I don't think it's that because we don't have Republican and Democratic. And in here in the Bahamas, neither do we have what we call a PLP station or FM station. I think what we do have in the Bahamas is you have a government station, which is obvious. ZNS is owned and operated and run by the government, funded by the government. So you naturally, your agenda would be to push what government policies are. And a lot of people don't understand that. I worked with ZNS for 13 years. I can tell you, the ZNS's purpose is to promote the policy and to push the policies of the government. And that's not a bad thing. That's their job. Their job is to let you know what the government policy is, what the procedure is, what are they doing. That's their job. That's their role, to highlight what government is doing. So you won't necessarily turn to the Broadcasting Corporation for critical analysis stories on the government's performance. That's not what they're there to do. And that's what other people do. Eyewitness News. We pride ourselves in bringing a new perspective to issues and ideas. We will challenge government's policy. We will bring people in to bring analysis to government's policy. We also believe that we're a station for the people, where we give you a clearer voice. So when other stations may not give you a voice to talk about stories that are impacting you, whether they be good or bad, we love to do those kind of stories. So we will focus heavily on stories that impact people, and we bring greater analysis to stories and policies of the government. And then you have Cable 12, who does news as well, our news. And their job kind of does the same thing as what we do. And they perhaps try to bring a little more definition. You see they do a lot of stories on people who have been impacted by something that's gone wrong. They do a lot of stories on that. They bring in a lot of analysis as well to other stories. So we kind of share the same kind of role, Eyewitness News and Cable Bahamas. But ZNS's role is to do that, to share the government's policy and their statements. Hopefully that clarifies it for you.
Go ahead, Jennifer. All right, there's one here. It says, what advice would you give to students returning home with a broadcast communication degree in regards to becoming a part of the news industry?
Good question. I think the first advice that I want to give to them is understand the times and the season of what we're facing. So generally off the top, it's a business. And so you may find that it's very difficult to get employed at this time in agencies where everybody's all about streamlining and being careful who they hire. What you need to do is find out what makes you unique from anybody else. What is your what makes you stand out as a student coming back with a journalism degree? Because while people may be limited in hiring, people will not walk away from good talent. Always remember that. while times may be tough and people may be very careful about hiring right now, they will also not turn their back to good talent. You may be the exception when they're not hiring, particularly if you're good. So find out what it is that makes you outstanding, and that's your selling point. And don't feel as if, oh boy, nobody hiring, I won't find a job. No, push the bar, get your interviews, get your demo tapes together, and highlight what is the thing that makes you different from everybody else. Because I know as a journalist and a news director, is even though we may not be hiring, if there's somebody out there that has something that will enhance us, I will go to bat for that person. So you always have to find what makes you different from every other person who's coming out with a degree in journalism, what makes you stand out. And then also, don't be afraid to start out with that internship. And what does that internship mean? Oftentimes no money. But in this industry that we work in, it's based on having experience, exposure, and talent. And if you can get on a platform that will give you that, it will turn around to money for you.
This one is related to the COVID. It says, what protocols are yourself and the team following during this pandemic? Have any of you been tested for the COVID-19?
Good question. Yes, we've tested reporters here in our newsroom just to make sure. And thankfully, all the tests have come out negative, those who've been tested. And we have a little running joke because we work in the newsroom. We say we're working here so much with each other and so close together, even though you still have social distancing. Boy, that if one of us have it, all of us do. So we kind of feel relaxed. We test people and they don't have it. We're like, okay, chances are we all right. But we do have protocols that are in place. We exercise social distancing in our news department. For example, our online reporters don't work during this pandemic from the office. They work from home. So only reporters who work in the newsroom are our TV reporters. So it allows us to have better spacing in the newsroom. They exercise when they go on assignments. We've limited a lot of our going out and interviewing people to now using technology like Zoom, Skype interviews, so that we don't have to do face-to-face interviews. So we've incorporated a lot more of that. When we do have to do face-to-face interviews, we've changed the way we do what we do. For example, you don't see us all the time use our short mic. We will use a mic on a boom stand so we can stand social distance from the person we're interviewing. We sanitize all of our equipment. Our reporters have their masks, they wear their mask. We also have lots of sanitizing stuff in here, sprays, sanitizers, gloves, masks. We use all of those things here so that we, as we're doing getting our job done, we're still making sure people are safe and secure at the same time.
All right, someone wants to know how is it working for Mr. Sebastian?
Oh, how is it working for him? Oh, what is it like working for him?
Yeah.
It's cool. Mr. Sebastian, our CEO is not here. He's not stationed here. His office isn't here. He's, as you can imagine, he's a CEO for a number of companies in his group of companies. And so rarely do we have interaction with him. Other than from time to time, he may send some suggestions, follow up on some things that he may want to see change or implementing something new. Other than that kind of communication, there's little communication from him. But it's interesting working for him. He is a perfectionist. And when you think you've done something great, to him, that's mediocre. Let's take it up a notch to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So he is one who pushes you. And he loves to think. He doesn't think out of the box. He doesn't believe in a box. So his thinking is very revolutionary because there is no box when it comes to his thinking. So he will always push you for something new that you've not seen before. And that's why for so many people, Eyewitness News is so revolutionary in doing so many different things. You see that we would do certain things and then you look around the other stations and eventually you see them doing it. Yeah, we know. It's because of his innovative ideas. If you notice, we were the first to come out with what we call the lower thirds. The lower thirds are all that writing you see at the bottom of the screen when the news is on, and you see the moving tickers of headlines and topic boxes, which tells you the topic of whatever the story is on, those kind of things. We were the first to implement that. Now you see all of our competitors have it. You notice we were also the first locally to implement the statistics column during this pandemic, where you have the international totals as well as the local totals. If you notice that we have that in our newscast, we're still the only one that has it in our newscast, but you see one of our competitors at live press conferences, they implemented the same thing as well. And so we love that. We love the fact that we can pioneer certain things, even though we're the new kid on the block. And that's because we have a leadership team that's very pioneering and revolutionary. And so they always are looking for the next. And that pushes us to always want to be better than we were yesterday.
This person
So to
says,
answer your question, it's great working for him.
it says, what about stories that conflict with your boss's business interests? How do you navigate those?
We still do them. We do them. If you notice that whenever there's been an issue with gaming, we carry it. We carry the story. We broadcast on it. And because at the end of the day, we want to have integrity in what we do. And so we don't want there to be barriers that said, oh, we can't do that because, no, we go after it, we handle it, and we deal with it. And luckily, he respects that and not try to tell us, don't do that story. He allows us to do the story. And so we handle it like any other media outlet. You have to handle it.
Good. I think this last one. Was there ever a story that had you so emotionally connected that you almost had you in tears?
All the time. All the time. Being a journalist is difficult because you have to have a strong control of your emotions, right? Because people always say, as a newsman or a presenter, you have to not show emotion. That's how they started out teaching us journalism. And as time evolved, you recognize that you're human. And while you have to display a degree of professionalism, you're human. There have been very rare times that you want to break down from a story because it's heart-wrenching. There's been times I've had to swallow hard. And there are times that you have to really brace yourself for the story because it's difficult and you don't want to show the emotion. But when you walk away from the camera, it's real. There have been times stories have bothered me so much that you just go home and pray about it because you're like, wow, that's sad. But I tell you one thing this profession will do, it teaches you how to be tough. And sometimes I fear not feeling emotional enough for a story because you're so used to covering it like murder scenes and stuff that you go on murder scenes, you see the family just outraged and a great display of emotions, and you're there covering the story. And sometimes you get so used to doing that you wonder, am I losing touch with my emotions? And so every now and then you do feel emotional about it. It's a good feeling because you recognize that you're still human and that you are still feeling for people. And it goes both ways, when it's sad and also when it's funny. Sometimes a story comes on and it's so funny. Y'all seen them before. Y'all seen them little memes going around me. Sometimes me and my colleague Shashina Roll, sometimes you're reading a story and you can't believe when you read the story how funny it is, and you're doing all you possibly can to not laugh, but you're human. It's funny, and you just end up breaking down laughing. It happens. We're human beings, and while we try to be professional, we are human. Sometimes you can't always cover it up, but you have to have control of it because every night you can go home and be depressed of what's going on. But you have to remember at the end of the day that you have hope. And that's why for me, what has helped me to be a journalist is also being a Christian believer, because boy, you need a higher hope after you've seen all that goes on in our world. You got to believe in something more, that things will get better.
Have you ever gotten a call back from one of your, say, a PM or a minister about something you did on TV and they fussed you about it? Or
oh yeah. Oh, listen. I've been cussed out.
oh wow.
I've been told off. And I talking a little like cuss. I talking about these ministers, they go in. The word, some of them word combinations I didn't know existed. But yeah, some have done that. But let me preface that. I have a good relationship with generally all of our leaders in our country, right? And so there is a personal level we have. So I know a lot of times when they may fuss me out or cuss at me, it's not a direct insult to me. It's just them in their emotions, and we move on. And we're cool later on down. And when they need something covered, they call and say, Clint, I need you covered it. Or they'll call and give me tips. At the end of the day, I try to remain professional. and I believe they respect that professionalism. And at the end of the day, I have good relationships with them all, right? I have good relationships with the Prime Minister or them all on a personal level. And so I understand when people get in their emotions, that's your emotions. But at the end of the day, we get along. Because I try to be professional in all we do and say. And so that's few and far between. It's not consistently happening all the time. It's few and far between. But yeah, there have been times, and you expect that. There have been times when people in the public call and they're upset over a story that's been done and they threaten you or they carry on bad with you. You just maintain your professionalism at the end of the day, and you hear people out. Don't just dismiss them. You hear them out, and you be respectful, because people are entitled to their views and their opinions. And you maintain your integrity and maintain what it is that you're doing, and you'll be fine.
All right, so we'll allow you to wrap up, Clint.
And I think what I want to wrap up in simply saying is that I love what I do. I love my career as a journalist. It's afforded me so many opportunities, not just traveling around the world, but meeting so many people. And at the end of the day, I think what stands out to me the most is being able to provide a voice for the everyday person, the common person, the person who may not have a title or position or status, but being able to get their story out, whether it be good or bad, and being able to make a difference. And when you are able to make a difference every day, that brings all the satisfaction you could want in the world, is being able to make a difference. And that's why I love my profession, because we're able to make a difference every day. And we strive to do that. We strive to have integrity. We strive to be honest and truthful. We strive to be the voice for the voiceless. But we also strive to be able to help people see our country, help people understand the policies of our government as well. And I also, people are surprised when I pull out the stats that we perhaps interview government officials more than we interview any other person. So we provide a balanced platform of government, the people, opposition, other voices in opposition, and providing that for people. And I believe that's what Bahamians are demanding, us to provide all of the information they need. And at the end of the day, they are wise enough to be able to make their own decisions once you give them the information. And I'm very grateful to this country for allowing us to be able to do what we do. Those who appreciate us, those who criticize us, those who condemn us, we appreciate them all, because at the end of the day, they keep us grounded, they keep us focused, and at the end of the day, we're able to continuously do what it is that we've been called to do as a fourth estate in a democratic society, and that is to be the voice of reasoning and the voice of the people and the voice of information. And we continue to hopefully be able to do that. And so I'm happy that we're able to do that even through this pandemic, to give you the information to get us through this. Because the good thing about this, we don't know how long it will last, but we all know one thing: this too will pass. It will come to pass. And our job is to get our people through this so that we get to that come to pass moment. And that's what we hope we're doing every day for you. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, great session. I'll take one last question because I know she didn't have an opportunity. I think Miss what's her name? Miss Hollis. Go ahead, Miss Hollis. Siobhan, you there? Okay, so she slipped out. I see one here from Tanya McFall. When providing constant coverage on a crisis like Hurricane Dorian, what tools besides your faith do you use to help your mental health?
Good question. Outside of my faith, to help me with to cope mentally, is being able to find peace. And I know that's still taking it back to my faith, but still being able to find peace in good things, right? And what I mean by that is, in every tragedy, there are still stories of triumph, stories of success. And I always try to find in everything the good thing that happened, or the survival story, or the story of great miracle, the story of great encouragement. I found that so many times in Dorian stories, people were encouraging us, and they had lost everything. People were talking about being encouraged to the country when they lost everything. And that to me blew my mind, is to hear people still have so much goodness to say in the midst of so much tragedy and disaster. And that always encourages me. That always lets me, listen, in every disaster I went to, I've not found out one person I couldn't find who had something good to say about, even though they're going through and things weren't all they wanted to be. They were like, oh, okay, Clint, nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you. I mean, when we were doing the Dorian thing, many of you who saw the Dorian coverage knew that the little coin thing, go get your supervisor, I'll be right here, came out during that period. And it was so funny, like when we travel to Abaco and Grand Bahama, and we're talking to people who are sitting on their foundation, that's all that's left of their foundation, the house gone and everything. And they would be like, oh, Clint, he saw your thing, the police officer, go get your supervisor. And they were laughing at that. And I was like, wow, in the midst of all of this disaster, these people found a moment to just laugh. And so that's always very uplifting for me, is meeting people and seeing the hope that they have in the midst of disaster.
All right, good stuff. This was a wonderful class. I just want to have an opportunity to thank you, Mr. Watson, for joining us.
Thank you.
We wish it could have been a little lengthier, but I'm sure most of us want to prepare for the PM's address tonight.
Including me, who's covering it, and then got to turn around and read the news tonight. So I got a long couple hours ahead of me.
Great. I saw a question here about the PM. Really, someone wanted to know, out of the three of them, which one gave you the best stories, or which one was more, I guess, who whenever you called upon them, they would be more, they'll take your call.
Sure. All three. I've had the privilege to cover all three of our prime ministers when I was at the Broadcasting Corporation. The first prime minister I covered at ZNS was Prime Minister Hubert Ingram. And then the second prime minister I covered was Prime Minister Perry Christie. And then right before I left, the last prime minister I covered there was Prime Minister Hubert Minnis. And so I've had a relationship with three of them, because as a reporter assigned to them, you travel with them and you end up spending a lot of time with them, covering them. They call you at any moment's notice, any hour of the day or night, if they need coverage on something or they're doing something. And so you get to see them outside of their prime minister's hat. You get to see them, the individual. And I've grown to respect each of them more after seeing them outside of wearing the prime minister's hat on, seeing these men, these fathers, these grandfathers, seeing them and respecting them. All of them are different, and they're strong in their various own ways, the three of them. And so it's hard to say who I enjoyed covering the most, because they all brought a different perspective. Hubert Ingram was a no-nonsense person, but I found that in traveling with him, he was always looking out for us and making sure we were okay. When we were covering him at these big conferences around the world, he would always call and say, y'all okay? Y'all need anything? He was presented that very fathering and nurturing kind of person. And then Prime Minister Christie, he was always keen on making sure we understood what he was talking about, his message, that he understood, showing us his plans, so that we always could write the story with greater understanding. He would give me great explanation, and he taught and mentored me so much during his time. And then Dr. Minnis, he was fun to be around, because he was real. Right, and he was approachable, and what you saw is what you got, and so they were all different in their ranks, and I respect them all, and I have very good relationships with all three of them today. All three of them, the president, prime minister, I enjoy a great relationship with him now, as well as the former prime ministers. I still have great relationships. I can pick up the phone and call any one of them at any time, and I respect them for that.
Good stuff. All right, thank you guys for joining us. We have another session today at 7 with another journalism major, Travis Edgecombe. He's going to be talking about public relations. And so with that said, tell us lastly where we can find you on Facebook, that kind of stuff, and then we'll end for today.
Sure. On Facebook, it's my name, as it says, Clint Watson. You can check out Eyewitness News Bahamas as well. Our Facebook, Instagram. Download our app from your Google Play Store, or from your iPhone store. We're there. The app is good. You can have news 24/7. You can watch any of our shows, programs at any time, not just when they're programming, running live. So download that app, Eyewitness News Bahamas. It'll help keep you and give you information. And I'm just happy to serve all of you. I'm here if you need to reach me for anything. Thank you so much for being a part.
All right, thank you. Enjoy your day, everybody.